Now here's this man who has the power of armies. I mean, he defeats entire coalitions of kings across the plain just to save his nephew, and then he turns around and he pleads with God for the saving of 50 righteous, or 40 righteous, or 30, or 20, or 10, or even 5 righteous, in the most wicked, heinous place in the whole planet, Sodom and Gomorrah. So his reputation probably preceded him. But I love how the Zohar puts it the best. His attitude really comes out strong in the Zohar. In the Toldot, this is in volume 4 of the Zohar from the Kabbalah Center. Volume 4, it says, in the Toldot on page 219, when Abraham was elevated with wisdom, and he beheld the glory of his master. Subsequently, it's written, and there was famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt. It's in Genesis. And Abraham went up out of Egypt. And he was elevated to the grade he had that he had at the beginning. He came in peace, and he went in peace. Ve'al b'shalom, unefak b'shalom. He came in peace, and he went in peace. Abraham was considered the friend of God. The way the Zohar puts this is so interesting, because here he has huge power. The man can command armies. He has a whole country who believes he is a prince of God, or if not even that, an archangel, a very high exalted status. He could command them to come and fight his wars for him if he wished. They were willing to give him the choicest land to bury Sarah, and he insisted, no, I'm going to pay the full price. I'm going to be fair here. You would charge $450 for someone else, then I'll be glad to pay you the $450. And that's when he buys the cave of Machpelah, and all that for Sarah for her burial spot. This is one of the things that turned Hugh Nibley on about Abraham in our own book of Abraham. I told you in the last podcast that Abraham was a great possessor of knowledge, sure, and he had a great righteousness, but he didn't stop. He didn't sit comfy and cozy and smug about his already very high status in this life. He sought more, and he sought for the blessings of the fathers and the priesthood, and he sought for the records of the fathers, and so on and so forth, with the whole point of being able to turn around and bless others because of it. And that is precisely what happens when he went to Egypt. They attempted to steal his wife from him, and they attempted to murder him. He turned around, especially in the Genesis Apocrypha now, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, he turns around and he puts his hands on Pharaoh's head and blesses the evil spirit out of the whole household and the whole land. See, it was smitten when Abraham was Sarah was violently taken from Abraham. Abraham doesn't turn around and call God to curse these people and damn them and wipe them out. No, he lays his hands on their head, and with the priesthood he gives them a blessing of healing. That's astonishing. He came in peace, he went in peace, is how the Zohar puts this. Very interesting. Well, Nibley is describing more along this idea that the Egyptian autobiographies, as they were written, included everyone within the household. Everyone was involved with the politics and the religion and the socio-economic situations. Nobody was excluded. The autobiographies of the New Kingdom are, like Abraham's, they're frankly ego-centered, where they discuss themselves, of course, because they're written in the first person. And they tell their desires and their ambitions and their values. What's the one thing they all wanted? They wanted to mainly have a happy life, a large posterity, and a blessed memory. So see, this is the Egyptian ideal. Well, this is the ideal. This is the essence, is it not, of the actual Abrahamic covenant that God sets up with Abraham. Very interesting here, isn't it? The same humane and enlightened spirit that made Abraham a legend in the East is strikingly displayed in the famous El Bershe tomb, on the walls of which a great nobleman in the mid-19th century B.C., and this is actually by some considered to be the time of Abraham. What this depicts is in a large and well-organized bodies of happy workmen under good-natured overseers and wise officials. And what they were doing, of course, is they were building this monumental project. And there are dozens of them all over ancient Egypt, as far as that goes. We have some of those remains. But they didn't do it as a form of victimhood. This is not what was happening. They were all working together with a high spirit of enthusiasm. There was a genuine religious fervor, and there was merry competitive camaraderie. They sung together cheerful songs and quips. The great man wanted everyone to be happy in serving God. Well, of course, this is an idealization, yes, but the ideal is the basis of their entire way of life. This is not a miserable tale of woe, in other words. The ultimate model of this patriarchal perfection is, of course, the king. And the king's rule is, of course, supposed to represent an expression of God's rule here on earth. It's interesting to note that it's not the king's person, but it is his sacred office of kingship and priesthood that are the real source of power and authority in the land. It is from that fact that the inevitable rivalry between Pharaoh and Abraham arises. Why? Because each claimed to hold a unique dispensation from God in heaven. And of course, when those two claims meet, you have an enormous clash. Yes. Ironically, very interestingly here, Egypt is where Abraham is at home the most. In his own country, he was an outcast. He was pushed from place to place in Canaan. It's only in Egypt that he comes to his own. He is, in fact, almost as thoroughly Egyptianized as his noble descendant Joseph, whose own father and brothers, remember, they settled permanently on Pharaoh's lands and adopted his customs according to the Genesis record, Genesis 5, 2 through 14 and 26. So the idea we find in Egyptian law, which was apparently the first recognition of the system of the family structure. This is the basis of the foundation of the Egyptian society. It's also the basis of the covenant of God with Abraham, isn't it? So he has some parallel passages that I want to briefly talk about. 5 or 6 pages here that I want to talk about, and then we'll get on with something else. I know I always enjoy looking